Hi, and welcome to Dr. Dave's podcast. This series of podcasts is going to be on a new book called Deathworlds to Lifeworlds, Collaboration with Strangers for Personal, Social, and Ecological Transformation. This book is just out and published by De Gruyters in Berlin, Germany. With us today is Valerie Bentz, who is a professor of human and organizational systems, specializing in phenomenology. She works at Fielding Graduate University in Santa Barbara and was my mentor when I was working on my dissertation. Valerie, welcome to the show.
Are you ready?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So with me today is Dr. Valerie Bentz. Welcome, Valerie. You're the lead editor on this new book, Deathworlds to Lifeworlds, and I'd like to ask a few questions about this. I understand this book of yours is based in transformative phenomenology. Now, those are big words. What really is phenomenology?
Oh, thank you for asking, Dr. Dave, and thank you for the opportunity to talk about this project.
Mm-hmm.
Phenomenology is a big word most people haven't heard of, but it simply means the study of consciousness. And it's about looking at everything, aware that everything we look at, we're looking at through our own minds, our own awareness.
All right, that seems awfully simple for such a big word. Tell me just a little bit more about it. It's a theory, obviously, but I think this book is more focused on practice, right?
Definitely. Phenomenology started in the 19th and 20th centuries by philosophers and mathematicians who felt that the sciences were looking at everything as if it were an object separated from them. And he felt that this was a crisis because it was separating humans from the world that we live in and that we share. And so Edmund Husserl, a mathematician, started talking about phenomena. Phenomena means an object of consciousness. And obviously everything we know, we know with our consciousness. I don't know if I answered your question, but.
Well, you did. I want to just get a little more clarification. This is about appearances, how the world around us appears to us and how our mind connects to it. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, definitely. And we found that after decades of philosophers writing about how we do this and what is our consciousness like and how it's intentional, we started to realize at Fielding Graduate University, which is a scholar practitioner doctoral program, that it makes a big difference in practice when you start to pull your whole being and your self-awareness into your work and to your research, and you start to apply it in everyday life and in work situations. So we found that just doing this work from within your own consciousness is transformative. And so we wrote a book in 2008 called Transformative Phenomenology about how and why this happens.
I want to come back to this notion that there is any separation between us as human beings and the world around us. But first, let me go on to my next question, which is the term death worlds. That really grabbed me when I first read it. Did you invent this term, and what does it mean?
Yes, I did invent it, I confess, because a main term used in phenomenological research is the term lifeworlds, that the great economist and social theorist Alfred Schutz spent his life work helping us understand how we navigate, how we live in everyday life from within our awareness. And he called this life worlds. Everything we know and do, we do within a life world. However, because of what's happening on our planet, we are facing an existential crisis. We are facing extinction of many species, hundreds of species. We're facing climate crisis. The UN just yesterday declared a red alert because of the massive fires all over the planet due to global warming.
Mm.
And so, but even before the crisis hit this level, and even before we had the COVID epidemic worldwide, we started to realize, and I say we because I've been working on this line of research with colleagues like Dr. Haddad and others for the past several decades. And we've been finding that when we start to write about our own experience from a really deep level, using tools that we use in writing phenomenology, like bracketing, set aside one aspect and look at other aspects, like imagining things to be different, you start to realize in collecting these narratives, these writings, that everyone is experiencing some kind of a death world, and that these are increasing. And even the so-called personal death worlds connect to a larger crisis in the environment. So we felt, and I guess we first used the term in a paper we gave in the University of Cologne, not Cologne. Oops, you're going to have to edit this. A conference in Germany. We used the term Deathworlds because of the conference was on the crisis of truth and falsity in our world, because of there's so many messages and it's so difficult to sort out between what's true and what's false. And we use that term just to wake people up all around us. Our life worlds are infused with death worlds. Addictions are on the increase, homelessness, depression. And then we were hit after we came out with this work initially, the worldwide COVID crisis.
Now, let me circle back for a moment to this idea that phenomenology, the practice of phenomenology, connects us to our world. And what seems to be just out there in the public mind, that somehow we're separated in some essential way, we're separated from the world around us. My question is, do you see a relationship between a worldview that says we're separate from our world and the death worlds that are being created?
Very definitely. I think the separation goes back a long way in human history. I want to say Western history, but the worldview that places humans above all other living creatures in the world is a world that separates us not only from the plants and animals that we depend on and that we share the planet with, but from each other as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay. You've explained a little bit about how you got the seed of this concept, death world, and have developed it. Tell me, how did that evolve into this book, this transnational study? How did you manage to grow it into that? How many universities were involved in this study? It was 4, isn't that right?
It was 3 mainly. However, a number of the students involved in the study came from universities in other parts of the world. We had 3. I was a visiting professor at the University of Łódź, Poland, and I was invited there to teach phenomenology in their doctoral program. because they came to realize the importance of starting to look from within one's own consciousness and within one's own life world. And while I was there, I was also working with a group of fielding doctoral students remotely, and a group of students from the University of Virgin Islands, where with Dr. Bart Biegner, we were teaching a course on phenomenology. So all of these students at the same time, this would have been the winter, spring of 2019, were writing phenomenologically based descriptions of their experience. I asked them to write about anything that they really cared about, some poignant experience, and then take this and over the 12 weeks, write about it in different ways using different phenomenological lenses and share these. So they share these using a software called Basecamp that Dr. Jim Marlett, my co-editor, developed, where they could see and read each other's work. So it became a collaborative effort.
Mm-hmm. In your introduction to the book, you describe collaboration with strangers, which is in the subtitle, as a life world antidote to Deathworlds. Could you speak more about that, please? The antidote is what I'm primarily interested in, that you see it as something that is going to neutralize toxins somehow.
Yeah, I think so, because what was remarkable is the ability and the willingness of persons who did not know each other before. Even the students at these universities, most of them didn't know each other before they started this writing and sharing process. And yet they were able to share something that they really cared about on a very deep level. So it shows that if given the permission and the open environment to share what we really care about, that a deep healing can take place that helps us collaborate with each other. And by collaboration, then we can start to see together and recognize what we call death worlds. And we can start to develop policies and programs and movements and healing strategies for change, because we're changed, because we stop then looking at our own lives and problems as something either to hide and be ashamed of, or not to be aware of, to put it aside and not see it. But we're able to open our eyes and hold our hands together across the world, across many countries, and say, here we are, and this is what we're facing, and together we can do something about it.
So transformative phenomenology, using the steps that the contributors to this book used in writing up their chapters, is this something that has to be done in groups, or can I do it alone?
That's such a good question, Dave. I think it's better to share it. If you do it alone, then what are you going to do with it? And I think that it's so important to collaborate with others, to share with others.
So it's meant to be shared. I guess my follow-up question to that is, if healing can occur through collaboration, and that collaboration in this method is an antidote to death worlds, then is the healing effect reduced if I do it as a solitary person?
That's such a good question. I don't know the answer, because all of my experience has been with folks who shared their work about these things.
Okay. Well, I guess I'll have to come out of my shell and start sharing.
Mhm.
What would you see as the major contribution to public dialogue? I mean, this book you have written and published through De Gruyter in Berlin, Germany, to enliven the public dialogue about things that are generally esoteric. They're somewhat hidden from the average person. But now this is being produced in order to, in a sense, invite the man on the street, as it were, to get acquainted with phenomenology. What would you see as the major contribution to the public dialogue that will come out of this book?
I think that once we start to recognize and be open about what we're experiencing, then we can deal with it. But as long as we're hiding away from it, it will just get worse and worse.
So now I have to ask you the psychological question. Well, why do you think people hide when something is wrong? What is it that they want to not divulge or have light shown on the issue?
Well, I think it's fear. Um, we all have some inherent self-preservative instincts, and we are afraid of death, all of us inherently. And we need to see that this is something we all face, and if we are open about what's there, then we can do something about it. But there's another factor in what my dear friend Four Arrows calls the dominant worldview that mitigates against it, and that's individualism. The idea that we're all supposed to achieve everything on our own for ourselves, as opposed to we're all together and we're taking care of each other and together.
Mhm. That's a good message, very strong, and we need that. We need to hear that more frequently. I also hear in your words that for someone who will practice transformative phenomenology, either alone or with others, is to practice some level of courage about what is real to them. Would that be correct?
Yes, very definitely. I found that given the opportunity to be real and deeply share, folks are longing to do that. And just given the safe place to do it and to see, they will respond.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I agree with you. And I enjoyed our work together on this. And when I look around and I just see people on a day-to-day basis, I do see, I sense some kind of intimidation, a generalized sort of intimidation by life of individuals. And even something as simple as saying hello to someone that you're passing on the sidewalk seems almost an effort these days, whereas before it was just so natural. I think there's been an increase in our general alienation toward one another, and I believe that this can help to break it down considerably. I had an eye exam earlier today, and I was sharing this book with my optometrist and her minions, and they were a little taken, they were shocked by the title. Like, where did that come from? And of course, you can hardly begin explaining it in real detail and depth. But when I got home, I emailed them the flyer so they could see this is a real book, and it's got information that's good for anyone who picks it up. They just have to thumb through it, find a spot that looks interesting, and start reading.
Well, if you can help your optometrist see better, that's really something.
That's my ultimate goal.